looked at that and I was like, okay, it seems like what we did that whole episode for the most part was we just stuck to part one of healing fiction, right? So we talked about, we just talked about the part one being the fiction of case history. And we talked about Freud and how he was, all the conversation we had about Freud essentially being a writer of fiction and creating his own genre that became psychoanalysis, so my idea, when I started editing that episode, I just decided, well, I'll just label it Healing Fiction Part 1. So then I figured this episode could be Healing Fiction Part 2. And then we would just talk about Part 2. And then we could do another episode that could be Healing Fiction Part 3, because this book's composed of 3 parts. And Part 3 is about Alfred Adler, which I haven't learned much about, but he's interestingly, and I'm gonna kind of skip ahead just to talk about this interesting little piece that I found. Do you know much about Alfred Adler? I'm sure you know who he is.
No. Yeah, I have, I've heard of him. But what's interesting is I believe that he may be, well, no, I don't know too much, so I'm gonna
so it's part 3. So it would be the next episode that we would go into, but I just want to share this little interesting thing. So, and he starts the section on him, which is actually part 2 of part 3, which part 3 is What Does the Soul Want, is part 3. So, and part 2 is Poetics of Adlerian Therapy. And so he starts with a Jung quote from the Collected Works, and this is Jung. He says, "No one who is interested in psychoanalysis and who wants to get anything like an adequate survey of the whole field of modern psychiatry should fail to study the writings of Adler. He will find them extremely stimulating." That's Jung saying that about Adler. So today's student, this is Hillman now, starting the section. Today's student of depth psychology acknowledges Alfred Adler as one of the triumvirate who originated the field, and then tends to leave it at that. So next to triumvirate, when he says that, there's a note, the second note for this section. And the note is what I find so interesting. And so the note for that says, "For the astrologically minded, the triumvirate were each born in fixed signs. Freud, May 6th, Taurus; Adler, February 7th, Aquarius; Jung, July 28th, Leo. And their agreement is more surprising than their intolerance and holding of their own positions." It's like, well, that's a curious thing to me, for him to insert this note for the astrologically minded, and then point out that the triumvirate, so Freud, Adler, and Jung, were born in fixed signs. So anyway, that was sort of a side that I guess is a preview of things to come for the next. I just wanted to share that because I found that note and I was like, it's just interesting. He leaves little breadcrumbs in his writings with astrology. It's just interesting to me. Why would
I was thinking,
oh my God, this fucking,
yeah, yeah, I know. It's so, I mean, it's all right, but like, our usual synergy is like, but no, I think that, I think that, Adler, I was thinking that was the psychotherapist that had an affair with Anais Nin, but I don't believe it is. And he was just, like, I learned about him in psychology, like AP psychology, I think is so as a foundational figure. But that's so interesting that Hillman gives him even that position. So it's definitely worth looking more into, isn't it?
Yes.
His work. Yeah.
And he's it's interesting because he took on the concept of the hermaphroditus. Adler did.
Oh, really? Mhm.
Mhm.
Really?
And that's
Oh,
what
interesting.
comes up with it in this section with his work, is that he talks a lot about hermaphroditus and, you know, and what
Mhm. Mhm.
Adler was doing. He was working with the consciousness of organs. It was very strange, like, uh, that I had not
Oh.
ran. Apparently, there's a precedence in Egyptian, um, like,
Mm.
funerary magic, with the whole mummifications, and like they would put different organs in different jars that were associated with different aspects or different gods, like that kind of thing. And I guess Adler kind of took
Wow.
on some of that, and sort of fleshed it out more in like a psychoanalytic, psychological way.
Wow,
So
wow, that's really interesting. Mm. Mhm.
yeah, I found it pretty
Hmm.
interesting. Um, and I finished the book
Well, and it
yesterday.
seemed you did? I was gonna say too, magic, like, ideas around magic can involve body parts and different if you're thinking about, like, different types of magic and even ritual that connect. I wonder with Egyptian history and where some of that came from could be tied in. So you finished the the book.
Yeah, last night, and then started rereading section 2 this morning. Uh, this I don't know what it is. This one's just got me enthralled. I feel like it's for some reason I don't. It seems like very important in understanding Hillman, his project,
Mm. Mhm.
and maybe it's just I resonate with it most from everything I've read, except for Dreams in the Underworld. That one's like really foundational too for me.
So can you tell me about it? Like, can you give me an overarching, like, overview of kind of what's interesting about it for you and, like, what it covers?
Yeah, so it was extremely interesting to me, the whole, for me, discovery of psychoanalysis being a creation essentially of fiction. That's just
Mm.
was
Mhm.
struck me as true, uh, but strange. And
Mhm.
I can't say exactly why I feel that way. But then
Mhm.
section 2, he goes into the Daemon, and
Uh-huh.
pretty much the whole section is just about the Daemon. Um, and then
Mhm.
and so that's a concept that, he really worked a lot within the Souls Code, and that was really I
Mhm.
mean, I've heard of the Daemon before, but, I hadn't really gone too far with the concept. It was, Herman Hesse wrote a book called Daemon, and I think that was
Hmm.
the first time I had ever come across, and it was just the name of the protagonist in that novel. And that
Uh-huh.
Herman Hesse had a very, had a powerful influence on me early on. I think I read,
Mm. Mhm.
Siddhartha, like 18, 19 years old. Um, so anyway, the concept of the daemon has been for me very interesting, and something I want to more into, and something that I keep coming back to, and all of my interests seem to be like circling this concept. And it's like I
Mhm.
can't stop coming back to it. And so, the pandemonium of images, Jung's contribution to Know Thyself is section 2 of Healing Fiction. So
Mhm.
that whole section was
Mhm.
just a pleasure, to to kind of dive more into what's going on with this concept of the daemon. And then, going into the work of Adler, who I've not read anything of, you know.
Well, so and yeah, so speaking of, you mentioned the source code, and like I have come across the concept of the daimon at different intervals. So part of why I'm excited about talking about this more and kind of even hearing your thoughts about it, because you've been really interested, and like you said, you kind of keep circling back to it. But you mentioned the source code, and I found, just for people that might not be familiar, I think Hillman does a good job of kind of summing up the daimon, because it goes back and back and back. I mean, this isn't a new term, and it wasn't coined by Hillman, but I'm going to read this little part, if that's okay for you, just as maybe a contextualization. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I just got, what the fuck? Like,
stop.
I mean, that means something. What the
Oh
fuck
my
does that mean?
It means we both have been taken due diligence. No. Did you just pop yours up? Was yours were you
That's just
showing yours on screen too? Or
I've been losing my highlighters lately, because I had a blue one and then a pink one, and then just yesterday I was like, fuck, I need a highlighter. And so I came in here and got a highlighter, and I just happened to pick that one. Then I noticed you were holding it, and I'm like, that's the same fucking color and the same highlighter that I am currently.
You're like, give me back my highlighter. Oh wait, I have my highlighter still, and we're virtual.
Is that a Sharpie?
Oh,
by
that's
chance?
so funny. It's actually no, it's a Coruscant.
All right, because it looks like the exact
funny.
same one. Mine's a Sharpie, but it looks like the exact same pen. It's the same color.
Yeah. Cheers. Yeah.
Sorry, I completely just got stupid on just a dumb thing like that. But
you were like, I saw you looking at me, and I was like, are we having a weird glitch and he can't hear me? All right, so that's so funny. I bet yours. I bet your highlighting in your books is not purple. All right, so he says on page 8 of the Soul's Code.
You bet they're not purple?
No, yeah. Right. I was kind of being ironic, because I was like, if you have a purple highlighter and I have a purple highlighter, what are the chances that both of ours are highlighted purple? So, so he says, the soul of each of us is given a unique daimon before we are born, and it has selected an image or pattern that we live on earth. This soul companion, the daimon, guides us here. In the process of arrival, however, we forget all that took place and believe we come empty into this world. The daimon remembers what is in your image and belongs to your pattern, and therefore your daimon is the carrier of your destiny. And I'm going to read a little bit more, because it talks about the Platonists and Platonists. As explained by the greatest of later Platonists, Plotinus, AD 205-270, we elected the body, the parents, the place, and the circumstances that suited the soul, and that, as the myth says, belonged to its necessity. This suggests that the circumstances, including my body and my parents, whom I may curse, are my soul's own choice, and I do not understand this because I have forgotten. So there's more, but I just kind of wanted to situate that a little bit as a basic core concept and understanding of kind of the daimon as it's defined by Hillman and influenced by the earlier Greek tradition, right?
Right. So something I've come to kind of understand, and he hints at, well, he doesn't hint at, but he kind of says it, like, it's the thing with the daemon is, it is personal to us individually, right? Like, you have your own daemon, I have my own daemon. It's something that is personal. So I guess in a way, sort of attached to the ego, maybe. I haven't completely fleshed that out all the way, but the reason I bring that up is because something that is come to light in reading this, the healing fiction is this idea that the soul, the anima mundi, is a collective, right? It's not like I've had this thought or this relation to it as if it's something that's like my soul. Like when we talk about our soul, we talk about like it's my individual soul, right? Like my soul is different from your soul, right? Or anybody else's.
Right.
Like it's my independent. But
Yeah.
that I think more properly is what the daemon is. Whereas the soul is the anima mundi, is a collective. It doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. And it's not personal in the same way as the daemon is.
Huh. It's interesting. So what are your thoughts on the role of the daemon then? And it's would you say intermediary, right? It's kind of an intermediary in a sense, would you say? This idea that you're talking about with the soul being the collective, perhaps a collective soul, right? That the individual daemon is tied in with. And that another synonym for it is genius, right? That it's associated with this notion of intelligence and genius to help you succeed or accomplish something. And Hillman talks about that in the Soul's Code when he talks about how a child doesn't enter the world for their own reasons with their own project, but is guided by their own genius. So that gives me this sense, and maybe, and this could be debated, or but this kind of my idea around it is that the the genius is acting as that intermediary to perform the function that is needed for the collective soul, and that they're guiding the individual toward completing that, because we're not really here to perform our own will, right? Even though it's connected to the will because it's individual or the ego per se, but the ego's will is not really the primary driver in a sense if we're listening to our daemon, right? But so yeah, what were you gonna say?
Yeah. So the ego should be in service to the daemon. That's sort of how I would put it. It's done properly. Like if you're in control of the ego, right? You have a collar
Right.
around its neck. But it's really,
Right.
wouldn't it really be the daemon that has the collar around its neck? But I don't know if that's proper, really the right image to use for that, because will's involved. But what is the thing that has the will? Do you see? It's like it's like we have to. We're talking about the ego. If you're talking about will, you're talking about the ego. Our personal will is the ego. So what is it?
Yeah.
What is the thing that then would put a collar around that thing's neck? What would about us? Like if the ego is my sense of me, right? The me in here that is talking. I mean, is it
Right.
always just the ego that's talking? And then if I'm
Right.
to control the ego and to put it in service to put it in proper relationship to the gods, it would be via the daemon. But there's choice there. Where's that choice coming from? I guess is what I'm saying. Like what is it that's choosing to either be in service to the daemon and the gods or not to be? Is it just the ego?
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
What's
So
and
I do. Yeah, I do. And I think you could probably say that I think the image of even like the collar around the neck, um, whether the daemon has an invested interest, which I would think that they would. And again, I think we'd probably have to really expand on and explore in a way like and clarify and maybe unpack what the daemon actually means or what it is or what it entails. Cause like there's so many different ways of understanding it, right? From so many different perspectives. But I would say that if his goal is to, or the energy of that is to help the individual, then the individual would supersede. They could theoretically have, the color image might work because you can disregard your daemon. That's part of what's so perilous about it, right? Is that if you disregard it and you go your own way and you're not really fulfilling that purpose, then you're in more dangerous territory, but I was thinking about too the different spheres of, and this, I mean, we have the Greek, we have like the Roman, we have the Judeo-Christian context and angels and how they're classified. So it's like, we'd almost like would have to cherry pick to really tie all of this together in a sense. But to me, like in terms of trying to trace the historical meaning of it, but it kind of depends on what context that I'm thinking about it within.
I think
Have you come across
that's what he does
uh-huh.
in this
Okay,
part
I was
2.
gonna say, have you
Essentially,
come across
it's
Iamblichus?
yeah, oh yeah.
Okay,
And,
that's I'm really intrigued by that.
yeah, I was looking at actually one of uh is it Iamblichus? Is that how you say his name?
Yeah,
I was
that's
thinking Iamblichus, but it's Iamblichus.
okay.
That's hard for me to say.
It might be
Um,
Iamblichus. It is. It's a
uh,
tongue twister.
well, there's all in with Latin, which that is probably Greek, but with Latin, I've recently at Erskill's actually just come up at a conversation around a fire one night with the elders. I was sitting, we were having a conversation about it, and I asked how to pronounce
Mhm,
Nigra, Nigra, Philistachus Nigra,
mhm,
because I've heard it pronounced
mhm,
Nigra. And the problem with Nigra, obviously,
mhm.
well, there's obviously, you can hear the problem with that. And it's just Latin for black, right? The word for black in Spanish is ni, I believe it's Negro, might be Negra. But
Mhm.
anyway,
And there's
so I was,
Negredo. There's Negredo for like in
yeah,
alchemy.
but
Mhm.
we know what the racial
Uh-huh.
slur, so it's like, I was like,
Right.
so is it
Yeah.
Negra or is it Nigra? Because one of the
Uh-huh.
guys is,
Uh-huh.
he's got a degree in, I don't know if he's a botanist or where, but he's got degrees in like plant shit. So I've like figured he'd know Latin. And then he was like, oh,
Mhm.
it's Nigra. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's what I thought. And then another guy was like, well, actually, it's Nigra, but it depends on which Latin you studied. So I guess there's several Latins.
Uh,
There's church Latin,
yeah.
apparently. There's different Latin pronunciations. So it's
Uh,
like a lot of these words, it depends on where you studied how you're going to pronounce it. And isn't
right.
that a bitch?
Right. Right.
Right? Because like I'm so
Well,
concerned
only if
with,
you have a notion. Uh-huh. Yeah, correctness in a sense, like
well, because
accuracy.
giving me away as in I'm not educated because I don't pronounce a word properly. And I actually saw I'm watching this show, The Girlfriend. It's called The Girlfriend. And she gets in a relationship with this super rich guy, right? His parents are like billionaires and he's just super wealthy. And she comes from like the working class. So she's all worried about that shit, right? And
Mm.
the mother's an artist that she runs, what are they called? Where you house art and then you show them. There's
Oh,
studios or art
a
studios, I think.
gallery?
Galleries, yeah, she runs
Like a
galleries.
art gallery?
And
Uh-huh.
this girlfriend's
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh, I love," and she says the artist's name who she's having this gallery for, and she's like, "Oh, and she pronounces it right, and she just barely pronounced it wrong. It was like the I was said wrong or something, and I was just like, "Oh, there's a depiction, in popular art right now of
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
thing
Right.
that's real. Like,
Right.
it's a
Right.
giveaway.
It's
If you
like
don't pronounce the word
it's a
properly."
signifier. It's a cultural signifier of a certain degree of intelligence, or it's come to connote to intelligence, right? And yeah, fair
Yeah, but
enough.
then come to find out that in Latin, you could be pronouncing it correctly because of the institution you studied it at, and that will be a different pronunciation than somebody else who's just as educated, but they studied somewhere else. So it's like, what are they going to do in that case?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
well, you studied at this
Right.
school and you pronounce it differently, so you're still educated and intelligent. You can pronounce it differently only because, I don't know.
However, you mentioned that it was probably Greek. So in this case, iambics would be. I would make my wager on iambics or iamblichus,
Blickus.
right? So
Iamblichus.
blickus.
And again, I'm not trying to be that asshole that's like, looking down my nose or
Right.
anything.
No, I know.
I dropped out of college, as I
Right.
mentioned all the time on the show.
Well, hey, I am all about, and I'm not even ashamed to say it, that if there's a Latin or a Greek or a pronunciation, I mean, I was a lit major, so I want to know that. I want to know what I like, because there is, and as you said, there may be multiple, but if there's a widely used pronunciation, give it to me. You know what I mean? Any day.
Yeah. I
So,
want to be part of
yeah.
the club that's educated.
Yeah, exactly. You're so in the club. So,
Well, I
but
don't have a
yeah.
sheepskin
So
though,
okay.
so
So what?
I'm not in the club, but I'm going to
Yeah.
try to trick my way into it. I'm
Yeah.
going to the sevens of sword my way into it.
You're doing it. You're doing it. It's happening. It's happening as we speak. And because you're about to tell me about iambics and what you've come across, right?
Oh yeah, well, I was just looking at one of his books it's called De Animis, I believe. There's a translation of it. I was on a Hellenic page. I was looking at Hellenic stuff this morning on the internet, and there's a website, and it has a reference section. And so I was looking at all these books that were like, sanctioned by this particular, corner of the internet. And Iamblichus's book, De Anima, came up, and I was like, oh, so I added it to my Amazon account. Of course, it's a $50 fucking book, but it seems like all the books that I want, they're like $50 at least. I can't find like a $5 book that I want to read, because they're all rare, and there's only 10 of them, and then, so anyway, so you were, what I want to go back to the back on topic here about talking about the Daemon, or as you say, Daimon. I've heard them pronounced both ways. I like Daemon. You like Daimon. We're just going to say it different.
Potato.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
In this case, I know that there are several pronunciations, and there's several spellings. There's Latin versions, there's Greek versions, so say it how you want.
But that's the thing. The Daemon doesn't care what you call him. The Daimon just wants you to call him. I mean, that's the moral.
Probably
of the
doesn't
story
want you to call him a
right?
demon.
Well, but I mean, that's part of the whole, like, if you go back to Vedic, the Asuras and the Devas, right? Like, the demons and the angels, they weren't so polar opposite in certain aspects. They were different manifestations of the light and the dark, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't have the same Judeo-Christian like stigma to have demon in association with the energy of that being or whatever. But anyway, but that's not what they are. They're, it's in this case.
So anyway, section 5 is demons and daemons. And he actually outlines in the West, what happened with all that. It's so interesting to me. And again, it's in a footnote. Like the meat of it is really from a footnote. But the part here,
right,
that I'll read this paragraph and then I'll read the footnote, because, like I said, I honestly, I'd like to just read all of this whole thing, like the whole chapter. Like that, maybe we should do that. Maybe I don't know about today, but I'm saying we can be all right, we're going to read healing fiction from start to fucking finish. And we're going to do part 1, 2, 3. And we're going to, we could probably do that. I think we could do that. Honestly, there's enough in here, and we can work astrology into it the whole way.
As a foundation for a deeper dive. Yeah. I like that idea.
Cause it's all here, and you're a
beginning
fucking
of
lit
course
major.
Material.
You have a master's in literature.
We're starting the course material. Yeah,
right. And
we're going to build it. We're building our.
You're qualified for sure. I mean, you got your master's in literature. So, I mean, and this is psychology using literature as a foundation for what archetypal psychology is. As Hillman's
That's what my
words.
Daemon wants me to do.
Yeah, obviously.
It's what my Daimon wants me to do. Yeah. So
Okay, so
it's
let me
happening.
let me read this this paragraph, and then I'm going to read the footnote that is attached to it. Early writers, for their understanding of the soul, their psychology, they have been turned to too long only for their doctrinal and moral arguments, for their spirituality. In fact, Jung's move has forced the return to the tradition called generally Neoplatonic, because only there did the middle realm of psyche receive passionate attention. Since 869, the main line of official thought had excluded soul by reducing man to a dualist anthropology of body and spirit. Jung's move also enables us to revivify Neoplatonism by relating its insights to the daemons within our contemporary consciousness and the plurality of its worlds. So, since 869, the main line of official thought had excluded soul by reducing man to a dualist anthropology of body and spirit. Now, that's what I highlighted, because I was like, that's interesting. And when he said at 869, there's a footnote, which is footnote 62. And that footnote says, in the 10th session, 11th canon of the Church Council of 869, man was officially dichotomized into a material and immaterial duality. The immaterial part merged soul with spirit. An essential distinction was lost. The elimination of soul had already been prepared in the Council of 789 with the taming of images. The lesson is clear. History recapitulates in psychology. Once the image is deprived of its autonomy and power, there is no longer experiential evidence for soul, which then declines, without the image, into a mere theological concept without necessity.
Wow.
So,
wow.
They literally, so I got to thinking about this morning, and I was like, so this is duality, male, female. And he talks about, in the Adler section, he talks a little bit about the male female duality and how like that's really the only duality is really male female. And and it goes into kind of like talking about yin and yang and how like yin and yang's flowing, and like it's like what you think masculine feminine, but yin yang's not necessarily masculine feminine, right? The two, like if you think of the yin yang symbol, it's like the two are flowing into each other. It's not so, it is black and white, that image, but it's like it's not so black and white, right? Like there's a little section in each that is in the other, and their boundaries are curved, you know what I mean? It's not a straight line. So this idea that the dichotomy, the duality, because properly, right, it's not a duality, right? It's a ternary. It's three. And it's so ironic because in Christianity, you have the Trinity, which isn't just Christian. I mean, because this, goes into sacred geometry, really, and the Vesica Piscis and the first shape coming through being a triangle. It's, it's not just about God, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, right? It's not just a Christian concept, but here you have, the I don't know if you call these, I don't know if these would be referred to as the church fathers at the Council of Nicaea. We're talking first millennia, towards the end of the first millennia, AD, where this is happening, like 100-year period where they're like canonizing the Bible essentially, and then you end up with the King James version, and then it's like, so, but this is like, you can see where it's like they took the soul out, right? And there's this controversy about the Holy Spirit being Sophia, and is the Holy Spirit female or not, with the Trinity. And then, but here you have them saying, okay, there's just a duality. The spirit and the soul are the same thing, which is really saying the soul isn't just the spirit is, right? And this, because the spirit is the above, right? It's like, it's not materiality, right? And the feminine,
Right.
the anima, like the soul, is about, you know, the underworld and materiality and the earth, and like, you know, so you see the Daemon, right, is in that middle ground, right? That's the the ternary. You have three, you know, you have spirit, soul, body, and then our connection to spirit, soul, right? Because like I was saying, anima mundi being like a collective, so the spirit, you could say, would be similar, right? It's like a collective thing, it's not an individual thing. Our relation to those things is the Daemon. That's how we communicate, and this is also how Iamblichus saw it, and these ancient Greek, you know, philosophers, for the most part, saw it as the Daemon is properly how we're in communion with the gods.
Right. So, in that way, to kind of give clarity to that concept of the intermediary, it's the intermediary between man and the gods in a similar way than Mercury, but without, with differences, right? Um, so, yeah, intermediary energy. When you talk about masculine, feminine with this, what do you think? And just, I'm kind of asking for your raw thoughts here, but what are some differences between soul and spirit if we want to flesh that out a little bit?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, the easy difference in my
Mhm.
mind is going to be duality, but it's I always stumble on this. Apollonian
Uh-huh.
versus Dionysian,
Uh-huh.
right? Or
Uh-huh.
solar
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
versus, you
Mhm.
know, underworld.
Mhm.
Solar
Mhm.
versus
Mhm.
psyche. Eros and psyche. Uh, so essentially, we're talking about the So you still see three here, right? You're talking about the underworld as opposed to the solar realm or the realm of the gods,
Mhm.
right? And then the in
Mhm.
between, where
Mhm.
we are. That's where we are,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Right. And where is our daimon?
Well, yeah, so it's here with us, you know? It like,
Mhm.
but it's like a supernatural or a metaphysical um sort of entity that isn't physical. So I imagine, right, that's why the Daemon needs us, because
Mhm.
we're composed of all that, right? But we have this
Yeah.
material body that our ego controls,
Right.
essentially. Like our
Right.
ego is the pilot of this material body.
Right. So, would you say then that it's fair that the daimon is a non-intellectual element that is guiding us where we need to go? And in that way, um, we're not really choosing the role that we're not choosing the end and the goal. And in fact, we're actually asked to be in this cooperative engagement with the non-intellectual elements in order to go where our intellect does want us to go once we know where that is. It's like the idea for um the non-rational, right? Like this has come up before and we've talked a good bit about it, that if we don't communicate with the non-intellectual elements, then we miss a lot toward our soul's aspiration or where our soul is trying to go. And I think the daimon is very connected to that. I would say, I would think, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
just want to push back a little bit on the non-intellectual part. I think that's true. I
okay.
think there's four ways of being, right?
Well, a good, first let me just say, because I want to, and then I want to hear what you're going to say, that it's not the exclusion of the intellectual, it's the inclusion of sense and emotion that guides us, right? Sense and emotion, but we're not casting out the intellect. But yeah.
And inspiration, right? Wouldn't those be the four Jungian ways or the four elements, right? Like it's
Yes.
like sense, perception,
Yeah.
feeling, intuition,
Uh-huh.
and then
Uh-huh.
inspiration.
Uh-huh.
Do I have that right? Because fire would
Passionate.
be
Yeah. Yeah.
fire.
Passionate inspiration, which is right. Fire, which passionate inspiration is so critical And it ties in with Eros, who was thought to be a daimon. And the Greeks argued about that in the symposium. And Socrates did a speech about the role of Eros in madness in the good life. And because, and this was part of where they got into, and there was this, discussion or debate among the philosophers in the symposium around the value of madness. And because Eros and passionate inspiration, and Eros being, a daimon, it's like, okay, then Eros cannot be bad if it's ultimately guiding us toward a good life. But what we know of as a good life is not the intellect alone, and what our soul knows and our contribution to the larger the larger soul is not purely rationalistic as much as the rational is valued. And so, yeah, it's kind of coming back to that full circle again with even, the material and the spirit and material. A spirit has been given a higher status, right, than the material.
Because of this Council of Nicaea in the West, anyways. I mean, that's where in history, that's why I find it so interesting. Like, there's a moment in history when that happens, and we know when it was. It was this, 869 or whatever, like, is when it was like, all right, no more 3. It's only 2 now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but when you're talking about, when you were just now talking about the spirit, the soul, one thing I want to point out that, Hillman's been constantly pointing out that this quality of the soul is a wanting. And I've been kind of like sticking with that a little bit because on the one hand, it's like, in the Eastern thinking of like Buddhism with samsara and desire, and that being essentially the way Mara sort of imprisons us in a way, right? With desire, which is a wanting. And then, but Hillman talks so much about the soul and the soul's wanting. What's fate? Did you say that's fate?
You said the Mora kind of traps us, right? With that desire, through that desire.
No, I said Mara. I was talking about the Eastern context in Buddhism, right? Mara is like the devil that tempts the Buddha when he's trying to reach enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, right? And he tempts him with like lust and like, it's like the temptation of Jesus, right? When Satan's got him on the mountain or whatever, and he's tempting him and he's saying, I'll give you all the shit, just, follow me and, worship me or whatever. Same thing. The same thing happens to the Buddha. It's just an Eastern conception. But what I'm saying is the wanting, the desire. That's what is the temptation, right? But the soul wants, and it's like properly, that's what the soul is. The soul is about wanting, and it's like in some ways, like the Christians aren't wrong,
right? Well, yeah. Although that it's in contradiction to the Greeks. I mean, that is part of where this idea of so I'm going to just read just a short quote because I think it responds directly to what you're saying. But it's from an article that was written by Martha Nussbaum. I was mentioning in the beginning that I've gone back to revisit it, The Fragility of Goodness, Luck and Ethics in Greek Tragedy and Philosophy. And it talks in here about how I'm going to read you this quote. It says, the role of emotion and appetite as guides is motivational. They move the whole person towards the good. But it is also cognitive, for they give the whole person information as to where goodness and beauty are, searching out and selecting themselves the beautiful objects. They have in themselves, well trained, a sense of value. We advance toward understanding by pursuing and attending to our complex appetitive, emotional responses to the beautiful. It would not have been accessible to intellect alone. The state of the lover who has fallen in love with someone good and beautiful is a state of passionate inspiration in which all elements of the personality are in a state of tremendous excitement. Sense and emotion are guides toward the good and the indices of its presence. So, and it's the desire nature though is what guides you to search for something deeper. Because if you're not that depth of right, where is it like is it a temptation, like in the case of Buddha, right? And is it Myra?
I think
Is he being
Mara.
pulled
I think it's Mara.
okay, Mara. Mara. So it's like is he getting pulled off track or is desire the in terms of its relationship to the daimon and the hunger for or the appetite for something to go somewhere, to do something, to be inspired by, is that actually taking you on the soul path, right? And like to be able to determine even the difference, because we know that what could be seen as madness may actually be your daimon in the form of, I mean, that was part of why it was so controversial that Eros was considered to be a daimon, right? So, yeah, I mean, in terms of whatever your point of view on that is, I would say that usually that desire it's informative, but it doesn't. Those decisions aren't made out of just the material impulses or the animal impulses of the material alone.
So I am no longer Buddhist. First of all, I'm gonna point that out
Uh-huh.
because, like, why? Well, this is one of the central reasons why. Because it's like the conception of, the pursuit of enlightenment, if that's what you're after, right? But what is enlightenment, right? So it's essentially a state of non-being, like it's, and so if, I mean, obviously it's more complicated. Like I've pointed out before, the Buddha said only what enlightenment wasn't, because you can't say what it is. So it's like, it's not something the ego can talk about. So, but is it true that like enlightenment is the end goal for, life? Like, is that the point? Are we here to reach enlightenment? Because like the Bodhisattva vow, like that's about, continuing to reincarnate until all sentient beings are free from samsara. Until all sentient beings reach enlightenment, a bodhisattva is going to continuously reincarnate to help facilitate that. But then what is that? If that goal is attained and everything's enlightened, then there's like, there's no friction, there's no duality, there's no light or dark, there's just
Growth.
Nothing. And so what is the point of that? Like,
evolution. Yeah. Where is the evolution, right?
So, but in the Christian conception, that sort of would agree with that, right? Because in Christianity, just in the Abrahamic faiths, essentially heaven would be synonymous, with enlightenment in Buddhist thought. And so, you see this third, the soul being demonized, right? And you see it in the card of the devil, right? You see it with the two figures chained around the neck to the devil. And they can, and the collar's loose. They can take the collar off. It's like they're willfully chained to the devil. And it's like, okay, what's the devil? It's materiality in this conception, right? It's, and the Gnostics took that even up a notch even further and essentially said that, this world is a prison planet. We're imprisoned here on this world.
Right.
So there's that concept of materiality is evil, and what is materiality is matter, right? Is mother, is the womb, it's and so there you see a parallel demonization of the female and the feminine in general. right? With Eve being
Mhm.
responsible,
Mhm.
and so you see it like I guess it's becoming more and more clear to me sort of how this concept of taking the daemon and making it demonizing it happened.
Yeah, yeah. Right, right. Yeah, and, the guardian angel concept is also found within the Judeo-Christian context.
Hmm.
And the angels are classified, I found a pretty cool article, medieval astrology guide. It was about it kind of talks about some of the connections, and it was interesting because I didn't realize that there was this breakdown of 7 choirs, right? Like seraphim, cherubim, all these different powers with different spheres of influences. And so the guardian daemon is most closely associated with the like the second uh kind of class or whatever, because they're more concerned with people and the material world, if you want to think of it that. So, and a part of why I was asking you about Iamblichus, and kind of if you'd come across him, is that apparently he wrote a work called the On the Egyptian Mysteries. um but and and Iamblichus had some criticism of connecting astrology to the daimon in the way that it has been, right? Like, and there's an astrology podcast episode by Chris Brennan and Lisa Scheim did an episode a while back, and I mean a lot of in that traditional text, in the traditional work that's been found and uncovered, there's like 4 different ways to compute that the 4 different, like, masters of the nativity, and the oiko des spotes, and the sun oiko des spotes, and then master of the nativity, and it's the daimon in astrology is connected to the part of spirit, one of the lots of fortune. And I'm not sure if you've stumbled into that yet or not, but Iamblichus was pretty critical of uh, and, because he would have read the astrological connections that, Vettius Valens those and the other earlier, astrologers were the formulas that they were working on around the Arabic lots that they pulled in, and were using, but the part of spirit was considered to be the daimon. And so, Iamblichus was like, basically critical, saying you can't find the daimon in somebody's astrology chart. And I'm wondering if you have any opinions on that yet, or um so far.
Uh, well, uh, I find that interesting because it's something that I've kind of put a pin in to like explore,
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
to see
Mhm. Mhm.
what exactly astrology could reveal about the daemon. And
Mhm.
so the part of spirit is what you're saying. The Iamblichus was saying the part of spirit was where the daemon is located in this chart.
No, he was critical of, like, Vettius Valens and some of the other astrologers that were, because they were using the part of spirit as a stand-in kind of for the daimon, and they were once you could calculate that, right, through the sun, moon, and ascendant, because there's a formulaic calculation, that it's some kind of calculation point that is, derived of the sun, moon, and ascendant, but that you can kind of find your daimon through that formula and through that part of spirit that is the kind of end math equation of that formula. So, like, my part of spirit is at 27 degrees Gemini. Right. So my you know, eh, kind of that, and whatever that calculation is in your chart would be a big signifier of your daimon. But Iamblichus, and this is quoting from the astrology article that I found that is quoting Iamblichus, he said, if we must, and this is a quote, if we must to reveal to you the truth concerning one's personal daimon, we must say that he is not distributed to us from one part of the heavens, nor from any of the visible planets, but from the entire cosmos, its multifaceted life and its multiform body through which the soul descends into generation, and a certain individual allotment is imparted to us, allotted to each of our aspects according to an individual jurisdiction. This daimon, therefore, is established in the paradigm even before souls descend into generation. And when the soul selects him as its leader, the daimon immediately attends to his task of fulfilling the lives of the soul to the body when it descends. So he basically doesn't feel like the daimon can be like, he doesn't want to give the credit to the planets, to the astrological planets, for, he believes that it exists independently of that. So he's critical, is in short, of that being found in the astrology chart. Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes me think of I'm not sure who it was. It might have been Plato. There's a reference to the choir, the celestial choir that we belong to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
of the planets being gods, and then like the daemon being sort of a belonging to one of those gods, right? I feel like what Iamblichus is saying is I certainly would tend to agree with that, but also would say that isn't it to me. It seems almost like the nativity, the whole thing, the whole nativity is your daemon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in fact, that's what we're looking at when we look at a nativity, is the daemon.
Mm.
How could it not
Mm.
be? Like, if we're here to do something, and the daemon, like everything is selected in this life to facilitate the work of the daemon. Isn't that sort of the conception of what the daemon's all about from the Greek? Like the
Mm-hmm.
Platonic,
Mm-hmm.
like we were talking about the Symphysium,
Right.
just what is
Yeah.
this entity? Well, isn't the whole point of it is like, it's the thing that has something to do here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so what isn't that what the nativity's showing? If you take all the information
Yeah.
in the nativity
Mm-hmm.
itself and what all that's saying, it's like, what
Mm-hmm.
is it saying? Is that your soul? Is that your spirit? Is it the daemon? And so, yeah, it makes sense to me to take the primal triad, the sun, moon, and ascendant, and, have an equation, and where those things combine and to create the daemon. That makes sense to me. The logic of that makes sense to me. However, I don't think that that's necessarily true either, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't feel like you can math an answer out of astrology like that. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like it's not, and that's what Iamblichus is saying. He's saying, look, this isn't a mathematical equation. It's more
Right.
sacrosanct and holy than
Mm-hmm.
that. We can't,
Mm-hmm.
because and if your ego can understand it to the point to at a mathematical level, then it's like, what are you? You're not talking about something that's just can be numbered, in an equation.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Uh,
Yeah,
I was just gonna say that yeah, that's exactly what some of these calculations did. They tabulated, which planet gets the most points based on this and that, and so it was very mathematical. And then they would give theurgic practices to a person to practice based on what planets, what specific activities are attributed to planetary influence. And so then the soul can kind of, in the theory, become closer to their guardian daemon, or their, so yeah, but that isn't, and there's even calculations for what your daemon's name is, which I know I've seen a recent, I can't remember who did a podcast on that, but you can break down what is the name of my daemon if you want, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
whether or
I've got a
not,
friend who told me
and then
about
you have
that.
to get into the whole language. Oh, yeah, you were telling me that, not, like a while back, but
Well,
yeah,
his thing was
so
Chaldean.
ha
There's apparently a Chaldean,
uh-huh.
like, equation for the gematria that's involved with
Mm,
that language. That where
mhm,
you put an equation together based on astrology, and I think it's astrological actually. It's been a while
so
since
if
he
it
told me
makes
about that.
sense to you, if it makes sense to you that you might, like you said, you start, you find some convergence point between the sun, moon, and ascendant, you know, especially that might be a really sensitive point within the chart for the Daemon. You kind of buy that? Is that, would you say?
Um, n- I buy the logic. However,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
that not it's I don't buy the logic. I understand the logic,
Mhm.
just like I understand the
Mhm.
logic
Mhm.
behind the thema mundi. Now, do I
Mhm.
agree that it's
Mhm.
true? Um,
Mhm.
not. I don't. At this point, I would say not beyond the language that it is. You know, it's not. It's true in the way that it created the language of astrology and that logic, and then that became something that's real. But is it written in stone? Because as we discussed a couple episodes ago, you know, it's based on the logic of Sirius rising in Egypt. You know,
Mhm.
um, the whole thing is based on that. Like all of astrology, essentially, apparently, the majority of the logic in astrology is based on Sirius rising in Egypt. You know, at the time of the inundation of the Nile. I mean, and how important that was to the
Mhm.
Egyptians, and 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 all of astrology is pinned to that one thing. And so it's like in my mind, I'm like, okay, I don't buy that. I don't buy that that logic applies to us now. However, we have inherited this
Right.
language that works, and that is astrology. And
Mhm.
so it works in the logic of that system in that language that we use, and there's truth to it, but I feel like it evolves. It can evolve. That's why I'm like with exaltations versus the lordship. Yeah, rulership versus exaltation, and which one's more powerful.
Oh, dignity.
Well, all of
Yeah.
it's
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's dignity. I think you can call it dignity, but it's dignities
Essential.
refers to
Mhm.
all of it, like decline, fall,
Mm.
exaltation, and dignity or rulership.
Mhm. Right.
Um. So my point that I'm making here is that, you know, what's more powerful? Are we splitting hairs? Uh, is it like the house systems? And that which house
Mhm.
systems
Mhm.
which one are you gonna use? And then, you know, you'll follow that logic, and then that's gonna tell you, you know, you know, when your hair's gonna fall out or whatever the fuck you wanna, you know, try to, you know,
Mhm.
calculate. You know, I don't,
Right. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
relationship with astrology is not of that kind. I'm not
Right.
interested in trying to predict fuck all, you see?
Right.
Because to
Right.
me, that's just woo. And I'm not interested in that.
Mhm.
I'm interested in what is this truth that we're talking about. And some things, yes, they're faded. Like the family you're born
Mhm.
into, the time and place you're born into, your socioeconomic status you're born into, what you're born into. You had, you know, maybe your Daemon chose that for you. But either way, to this ego,
Mhm.
that's fate. And when I die, I really firmly
Mhm.
believe that nothing is going to change that. That's written in stone. Atropos will cut my thread, and that's the end of this life. That's been predetermined. I can't do shit about it. Nothing I do is going to change that.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean I should smoke cigarettes
Interesting.
and shoot heroin because, you know, if it's all, you know, it doesn't mean meaninglessness. It just means that some things, yes,
Yeah,
they're faded.
you could limp along for in agony until that 92nd birthday or whatever. If you make the choices that are not good. I think that's really interesting too. As far as what you're talking about, because it's like, well, the image of a chart, right? Like the image of the mandala of the natal chart. Case in point, that if we're talking about from like the standpoint or the perspective of Hillman, and we're talking about the daimon as image or connected to image, you know, are what is it that meditating on and connecting directly or having the conversation with the, you know, what is it, the holy guardian angel conversation of knowledge of the holy guardian angel in high magic, it's like that is a certain, I think, synonymous kind of process that has also, bled down into a different tradition. But nonetheless, it's like when we're having that larger imagistic, symbolic, intimate connection to, whether that's the image or the chart as image, then perhaps we're getting more insight and understanding and guidance than when we're, you know, drilling down into exactly the right calculation of the 27th degree of Gemini where my guardian angel resides.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of idea, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's precision like that in astrology, personally. I don't.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe there is. I'm not. Fuck, I'm not God. I'm just saying, for me, uh, I don't think that's what astrology is. I don't think now, right, that that's
Mhm.
something we should be pursuing. Um, I mean, all I can say is me. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, it became right. The astrology became the the astrology of personality, right? And when you make that shift from predictive omen based ancient astrology, right? You make that switch and it becomes psychological and becomes the astrology of personality. What are we talking about calculations for? Because calculating is like what time. It's like it's about timing. And I'm not saying that you can't obviously, like cycles, yeah, like Saturn, for instance, like just planetary cycles, orbital periods, like, yeah, obviously the human life, at 29, 30, like when the Saturn return hits, there's a difference there, you know what I mean? And Uranus, 84 years, that's pretty bounds pretty well a good healthy human life, right? 84 years, I mean, that's so, like, is there timing? Can timing? Yeah, sure. I'm not saying you can't time things, but I'm saying that to what extent can you predict events? I don't.
Mhm.
It could be. You know what? There's probably that's the thing. Maybe you can do it. There are
Mhm.
astrologers that likely can do that kind of thing. I'm just not interested in doing that. That's what
Hmm.
I'm saying. I think that's the best way of putting
Well,
it.
yeah, and I think too that some of the understanding of the tapestry of and the ways that energy can manifest, there is that non-rationalistic, non-linear, intuitive insight that comes, but it comes more like a flash of lightning or as an intuition rather than a hard truth or a prediction per se. It's like it can astound the astrologer as much as the client because the astrologer might just be reading the writing on the wall and the synchronicity of it is like, oh, it's just an image. It's imagistic, right? Where it's like, and maybe I'm doing a reading for someone and I'm trying to describe the archetypal kind of energy influence. And as you said, there are processes that are very impactful that knowing about those processes, like a Chiron return, for example,
Hmm.
that's beneficial. But if I'm trying to say, and during my Chiron return, I will heal this, this, and this, about myself, or you will heal this, this, and this about yourself specifically. These are your wounds and these are how you're going to heal. And it's going to come in the form of this person that's going to come into your life and act as a catalyst. It's like that is taking away the mystery. That is attempting to suffocate the infinite creative potentials of how a soul might be able to heal through a Chiron return. But if, say, you're having that reading and you're trying to describe what that process might feel like, because and you brought this point up, is like you, and I thought it was really insightful too, is like when we're giving a chart, and maybe it was from something you read from Arroyo, maybe, but it's like, what does it feel like versus what's going to happen? right? And so when you're in the middle of this explanation of, or to try to convey to a client what this process might, entail on an inner level, you might get an image of something, or you might get, like, by the context of their life, something might come in, but that's very different. That's very, like, right brain, rather than using the specifics of the astrology to, you know, predict hard predictions, right?
Yeah, and obviously there's something there with the number. Uh
Mhm.
and for me, there's a difference, right, between counting and number. Like one's qualitative,
Mm.
one's
Huh.
quantitative. Like, and there's a huge
Mhm.
world difference there. Counting is just
Mhm.
that. It's like an a chimpanzee can count to, like, oh, 3 or
Right.
4 or whatever. I don't know. They can count to some number,
Hmm.
right? It's like,
Huh.
okay. So, but quantity, quality, the quality of number. Now you can start talking
Mm.
about,
Mhm.
you know, geometry in the platonic solids, and a reality
Hmm.
that is not that's not woo. I mean, it's
Mhm.
scientific. Like the platonic
Mhm.
solids are like
Mhm.
scientific knowledge. That's not just woo woo, and it's manifestation, right? And it's the magic of manifestation. And there's magic there. And yes, it's
Mm.
associated
Mm.
with number. And obviously there is some, like, quantitative truth there. Otherwise, you couldn't draw down the moon and take factorial 11 minus factorial 7 and spit out the Earth's diameter in miles. And this is encoded in the pyramid. I mean,
Mhm.
that kind of shit is
Mhm.
mathematical. So it's like, obviously there
Mhm.
is truth to that. And
Mhm.
and so it's just in astrology. And it's maybe just this skeptical edge that I'm not going to get rid of, and don't honestly, I don't want to get rid of.
That you're surfing along like a California surfer. You're,
Yeah, no
like,
worries.
surfing on that edge constantly. Yeah, but right, that it's informing, and it's kind of a razor's edge that keeps you in that duality, actually, but or in containing the polarity, right? Like, of the two, of both. And, part of even the nature of astrological, like, polarity, even in synastry, right? Like, I've been reading a book on synastry, and it's, like, talking about how opposites are so that energy is so integrative and so magnetizing because of the nature of that 180 degree. So there's a qualitative energy in an opposition, but there's also, like, the nature of the actual mathematical, geometrical relationship itself.
Geometrical, though, see, that's the thing. Like, if you're gonna talk about number and geometry, I feel like the equation has to be bounded inside of geometry, right? Because geometry is like number being actualized in reality, and not. It's like
Mm,
coming through the Vesica
mm,
Pisces, right? Like, it's like number is just nous. It's Plato's forms,
mm.
it's the perfect ideas that, like, maybe they are more real than reality, but we don't experience that. We experience material reality as the most real thing. And I think for me, what I'm trying to do is be a bridge between, you know, the woo and the science. I want to be I want both sides to be able to communicate through the space that I'm holding, so that it's not non-scientific, but it's also not woo. Like, you
There's
know what I mean?
there's a
Like that.
structural there's a structural integrity, is it's like universal structural integrity that you want to kind of maintain, just like you would maintain the structural integrity of a house. But, it's like on a philosophical level or a spiritual level, right?
Yeah, because it's easy for someone to spit out platitudes or just the secret, and
Yeah.
you're talking about things you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and like maybe what you're saying is true, but you have no idea why or how, and like, does it matter?
Yeah.
Yes, it does matter. I feel like, because that's why it's a cult, right? It's not free. You have to do the work, and it takes work.
OCCULT.
Yes,
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
cult. Yeah. So I
So,
feel like
can I
that.
ask you something?
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna ask you if you would say something about the Vesica Pisces and maybe define that a little bit, if you would be okay with
Yeah,
that.
so it's essentially just the almond shape that is generated by two circles whose circumferences are passing through each other's center. Right? So it's
Mhm, mhm,
like that. So that's the Vesica
mhm,
Pisces, and so in geometry, in sacred geometry, that's the start. Well, it's the dyad, right? So it's the monad is the circle, the sphere, right? The circle.
mhm, mhm,
So it the dyad, right? Bert is the womb,
mhm,
the opening into
mhm,
materiality, by which
mhm,
the essentially the triangle comes through. The triad is three is the
mhm,
triangle. So, but then the square also, right? The
mhm,
essentially
mhm,
the platonic solids come through the Vesica Pisces, right? The 2D versions of them,
mhm,
right? So but you can do the same thing with spheres. So like
mhm, mhm, mm,
uh so the tetrad actually is a pyramid shape, right? But it's just
uh-huh.
it's composed of four triangles. Uh,
Okay.
so and
Mhm,
it's the first, like, it's the Vesica Pisces is essentially, it's just the womb whereby manifestation enters, like, into physical reality, and um so in sacred geometry, you know,
uh-huh,
um,
uh-huh.
I don't know if that does that. Did I do that
Yeah,
justice at all?
it does. No, yeah, you did, and I was gonna ask too if because so it's associated with the fertility and the womb and the divine feminine, and isn't it associated with the Roman goddess Venus? With like, isn't it associated with Venus in a in an archetypal way as
I
well?
imagine so. I have not ran across that, but I don't see how it couldn't how it could not be. I
Yeah, I
mean, because
think
we were
like
talking about desire, and the
right, right.
Venus is responsible for, like, for life in that way, right? Like, that's how
Mhm,
life perpetuates itself via the Venusian desire, sex,
mhm,
like,
mhm.
yeah.
Right,
So the
right,
womb,
yeah,
the vagina,
yeah,
because it's not
mhm,
just the womb,
mhm.
it's the vagina. That shape, that
Right,
almond
the
shape is
shape
shaped like
is
a
yeah,
vagina.
it's yoni, right? It is, it's the kind of the cosmic, uh, geometrical yoni and the in the geometrical iconographic way, yeah. So, yeah, I just thought that was really interesting that, well, when you mentioned it, I know a lot of people don't really know what that is, and that astrologically, it really is connected to Venus, and yeah, earlier in the conversation and kind of the discussion too around the role that even like that Venus can play in your birth chart or the archetypal understanding of Venus in the birth chart, obviously speaking as a true Taurus here, that that's an to know what the desired nature is, whether that's in relationships or in your aesthetics or your artistic interests and pursuits, that it can be really helpful and informative to know that and understand the Venus in your birth chart.